everyone, and welcome to an Americans for Limited Government live stream. I'm Catherine Mortensen, and as you can see, Rick and I are both at home today. I'm in Northern Virginia, where we're snowed in. We have about 4 to 6 inches of snow here. How about you there in Southern Maryland, Rick?
10 to 12. It's pretty amazing. It's a lot of snow. The couple of trees are going to have to get cut down as a result. It's doing some damage to my backyard, but so far so good.
Yeah, so Rick, I don't think any of us expected to be working from home today, but we definitely wanted to get back into the groove of things. We've been off for the New Year's and Christmas holidays, so welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone had a great Christmas and a Happy New Year. And David Potter is producing in the background for us. David, if you want to put up the banner and so people can see what we're talking about today, the headline is basically, what are the GOP priorities for the new year? And they're already starting to look at what their strategy will be for taking back the House and the Senate, or just the House or the Senate. And Rick, you were quoted in a Washington Times article over the Christmas break, responding to kind of what the GOP is coalescing around and some of your concerns, because you've obviously been in Washington for a number of years. You've seen politicians come and go, make a lot of promises, especially when they're, trying to gain the majority. So tell me what some of your concerns are as we head into this new midterm year.
Well, my concerns are basically if you shoot low, you're not going to hit anything more. And what the Republicans should be doing is they should be laying out the philosophical differences of governance between the Democrats and the Republicans. They should be laying out real changes for how you restructure government, because the objective isn't 2023 or 2024. The objective is setting the agenda for 2025, when the Republicans will hopefully have control of all the levers of power, and we're able to do some stuff, where we're able to actually get things done, where we can actually cut the size and scope of government, where we can start dealing with an outsized federal workforce, and most importantly, a workforce that has proven itself to be more than willing to be at times willing complicit actors in a partisan game. We have to tackle those kind of issues, and the way to do it is now start talking about the ways to do it, frame those issues, and then fight for them over the 2023, 2022, 2023, 2024, and you will win some, because of the control that the Republicans will have with having both houses of Congress, that should come to fruition, and the ability then to force the Biden administration to compromise or shut down the government. So there's leverage points, and the Republicans are shooting too low to be able to exercise them.
Well, Rick, I want to go through what Carrie Pickett, the reporter there at the Washington Times, found, that the GOP has sort of 7 areas of priority, and House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy has put together 7 different task groups. Each one has about 20 members, and each one is charged with a different policy priority. So one of them, they're saying, is jobs and the economy. Now, clearly, I think this is going to be the big one, as the polls continue to show us that people are worried about high gas prices. They're worried about being able to pay their bills each month. They're worried about just the rising costs of everything. So what is the message there that you think the GOP ought to have?
Well, first of all, the GOP needs to be pushing legislation that would open up U.S. drilling again, which would get us out from under the lawsuits we have, because the Biden administration has cut contracts with people like the Keystone XL pipeline and jam it down his throat. People understand that when we turn ourselves over, when we turn over our energy security over to Saudi Arabia, over to Iran, over to countries around the world that may not like us that much, when you turn over energy security to them, you're putting our national security at risk, and you're putting our economic security at risk. So let's go back and put real measures that can be done to increase domestic production, and this idea that we're going to basically turn our economy over to a green economy by taking on some of the outrageous anti-real energy moves that Biden's been making, most notably his attempt to basically force there to be a significant, about 20% of the car fleet to be electric by 2026, which is insane.
The other one they want to, another policy priority is big tech censorship. They want to rein in what they call the big tech oligarchs. Is this something that I think that they will have the support of the American people on? I mean, I think they will, but is this going to be hard to do, given
it'll be a
the
huge
control
fight
of the big tech?
I think it's good that they're going to be talking about this in 2022, setting up a fight in 2023. The Democrats have expressed a willingness to deal with Section 220, which is the section that deals with the Communications Decency Act, gives the big tech platforms the ability to not be sued if they don't act as editors. But there's a line in there which basically gives them an out to do whatever they want to do. And it will be, I think the conclusion is becoming really clear that we have to deal with it legislatively, that lawfare won't work. And the idea that, we're going to sue and win doesn't work. And that there's going to be any kind of meaningful administration action based on breaking up big tech. There won't be any that looks at all like anything a Republican would or should support, because the left wants to do this. But what they want to do is they want to compel big tech to censor conservatives more. And so when they talk about taking on big tech, they talk about threatening Zuckerberg with being broken up, or Google with being broken up, if they don't censor conservative voices even more than they are. So that's anytime you see something where they're talking about bipartisan agreement, that means really need to look careful, because the Democrats' objective is not to create neutral platforms. The Democrats' objective is to shut you and me up.
Rick, Jim Jordan, one of our favorite representatives on the Hill, is going to be heading up the task force and a category called American Freedoms.
Yeah.
And it's very broad. It actually includes things like opposing the vax mandates, opposing, the FBI going after parents at school board meetings. I think that's an area that has broad bipartisan support, where Americans are rejecting this big government overreach into so many aspects of our lives. Are there any specific words of advice or things that you want to see Jim Jordan look at, or just tactics he can use?
Very simply, I think he needs to go and set the predicate for that the FBI is engaged in massive overreach, that the Patriot Act has gone too far and it's been utilized not the way that it was ever intended, or at least promised, but actually the way the civil libertarians on the left feared it would be. And I believe he can make a case for reining in the intelligence community and big intel in a way that will attract the left to it as well. He has to set it up in 2022, and then really start working on the details in 2023 in terms of getting committee support and the like. And as soon as the Democrats figure out that they may not have the presidency in 2025, they're going to be very interested in reforming those agencies. And that's an opportunity, since we don't want to use those agencies in a means of compelling the public to do what they don't want to do, or spying on people. I think it provides a unique opportunity to get something real done in 2023 and 2024, actually in 2024, because the Democrats can be afraid that a Republican is going to come in and is going to do exactly to them what the Democrats have been doing to us.
Yeah, I personally hope we don't do that, because I think, two wrongs don't make a right. But that is certainly a threat hanging out there that Democrats should be concerned with, because what they have done to turn, like you said, our intelligence agencies against our citizenry is absolutely wrong. And I'm happy that the Republicans are fighting back on that. The
Let
other
me give you
one
one thing
that
they
you
could
touched.
do, right? Let me give you one thing that they could do that kind of falls off of what people would normally think about. What they ought to do is they ought to pass same legislation they passed to reform the Veterans Administration to allow for non-performing, lazy or recalcitrant employees to be fired out of the Veterans Administration. That was passed by partisan basis in the first year of the Trump administration and proved to be very successful in undoing the knots that exist in the VA because they've got people in there who were competent, but also want to do the work and got the people out who were kind of just waiting for their career to end. So if they took that, it's called the Merit Act. If they took that, and they don't have to apply it to the entire government, we'll do that, try to do that in 2025. But if they did that simple thing and just said for DOJ, okay, we're going to do this for DOJ. At that juncture, you would put into place in 2024, late 2024, you would put into place a means to be able to root out the bad actors at Department of Justice immediately in 2025, and effectively not have a circumstance like Donald Trump found himself in 2021 when, not 2020, 2017, when he came in and had a DOJ that was dedicated to impeaching him. And that's
Right.
that's something which is not acceptable, but it has to be done in such a way that there's real standards, and the Merit Act has real standards. So I think it would help clean up a lot of the mess, and we might be able to sneak it in 2024. Jordan should look really hard at that because while it's personnel policy, it normally doesn't fit under that. Department of Justice, I'll just tell you the truth. When we started pushing that back in 2015, 2014, I guess it's 2014 when we started pushing that. We started pushing it specifically with DOJ in mind. My goal in pushing that was to get it passed in DOJ for DOJ through an appropriations bill. Once Trump became president, and we saw the problems that Jeff Sessions was having with the deep state in DOJ. I begged the Trump administration to do that and pass it for the entire government. But if they could only get one thing, get DOJ. If they can only get two things, get DOJ and Treasury, because then you could get rid of the IRS people and DOJ. But
Right.
unfortunately, that didn't happen. But I think there's an opportunity to do that. We have to reform that system. If we don't reform that system, it will be the growth of the administrative state will be unstoppable.
Rick, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but another discrete task force they have will look at energy policy. We know that just a year ago, when Joe Biden came into office, we were energy independent. One of the first things he did was cut off all, new leases on federal lands. And it's been a disaster. I think everyone can see that. He's been begging OPEC to produce more oil when we, in fact, have enough oil and energy here to be independent of OPEC. So, what do you think that the GOP should? What should their message be, and what are some tactics they can use there?
Well, I think everybody can see what the price of the pump is, and assuming that doesn't change in any meaningful way, you've got a very simple contrast between allowing energy independence and not at the pump. A lot of that's subjected to the variables in the world market, and so if that is not available, as an example, then I think really you have to look at the uh, communities are being devastated and would be devastated by if the Green New Deal went into effect and you no longer had even an attempt to be energy sufficient. You have to look at I'd take Western Pennsylvania, and I would compare it to New York, where you have the same Marcellus shale fields, and New York State will not allow those shields to have any drilling in them, and it is a wasteland. I mean, it's economically depressed. The people there are hardworking. They want to work there. They're industrious. There's nothing wrong with the people. The problem is the government policy is impoverishing them. Whereas in Pennsylvania and Ohio, they have become relatively rejuvenated. People around Pittsburgh say that shale oil and shale natural gas in particular have rejuvenated their entire economies. So that's a great compare and contrast. You can compare and contrast Montana, which has a prohibition on developing the fracked oil and the Bakken oil fields, versus North Dakota, which is vibrant where they're developed it. So there's lots of lines where you almost have that old picture of South Korea on the bottom where it's all lit up, and you have on the top North Korea where there's no lights. Well, that's what you see economically when you look at Pennsylvania versus New York and Montana, eastern Montana, where the Bakken is, next to North Dakota. There's a disparity, economic disparity that's so stark that that's what we have to show. We have to make people understand that, you know what, these are lots of people who are now enjoying the American dream, and they're enjoying the American dream because America is utilizing our own resources rather than relying upon people who don't like us very much. And I think that ultimately that will win the day.
And make sure if you like what you're seeing here, if you're in agreement that we need limited government, we need maximum individual liberty and freedom, subscribe to our YouTube channel and share the link, share the video with others. We're trying to reach as many people as we can to be a part of our limited government movement, because we know that millions of Americans agree with us. In fact, we believe we're the majority. And we just want to get our message out there and have our voices heard. And one of the things, Rick, that we do, I mean, to pat ourselves on the back a little here, that we do very well is we give people an opportunity to communicate directly with their lawmakers. Sometimes it's a state or local, more often it's at the federal level, urging them on these very priorities that we're talking about now. In fact, last year, Rick, we sent out more than 1.7 million emails. Not we necessarily, but our followers and our supporters. 1.7 emails to lawmakers. And that was hugely impactful. I mean, we were able to defeat the Build Back Broke bill. Obviously, the Democrats think that they still have a chance at somehow getting it through, maybe piecemeal. But that was largely due to the efforts of just regular people communicating with their lawmakers. So that's join our group.
You can't say that enough, Catherine. The bottom line is, engaging, giving people the tools and the power to engage their lawmakers, and in a meaningful way with on issues that are hot and trending, but also issues that matter to America, whether they're hot and trending or not. Giving people the capacity to engage with their lawmakers in a way that the lawmakers are actually willing to be engaged with. One of the dirty little secrets is with letters, and this is even when you were on the Hill a few years ago, with letters, because of 9/11, the letters don't really, they get all sorts of weird stuff happens to them. They don't really arrive in a timely fashion. And as a result, you send a letter and nobody really sees it because it's run through all this different things to kill anthrax and all that thing. You get this brittle piece of paper that sometimes is not readable. And if it is readable, it's like 2 months too late. So so the old way of communicating that I certainly used many years ago as a National Rifle Association doesn't work anymore. And when you call into people, what ends up happening is very simple. You end up having people, legislators, their people just do a checklist of who is actually what they're calling on and what they think. And so this gives you an opportunity to get some actual language into them that tells them what you think and gives them a reason why. And while they may be just counting noses on this, by putting volume in, by putting real lead on the target, so to speak, people respond to that, and legislators respond to that. We know that because they tell us they respond to that. And folks, our goal, and I see Catherine's gone away, but our goal is to be able to double our impact this year. And that means we just want to be able to have twice as many people receiving our information. And then twice as many people receiving our information, then we're going to have twice as many people responding, and that's a massive input. That's a force multiplier that you can help do by getting people to subscribe to this channel. Also, sign up for our newsletter. Go to getliberty.org and subscribe. You get the free newsletter. Get your friends to. So send them those engaged things when you get them. Encourage them to engage. And if they do, we will then be keeping them informed of what's going on as well. So let's just expand the base by having the people who care about this, who we're communicating with.
My Wi-Fi went out.
Yeah.
Can I? It says I can go near another phone.
No.
Okay, Catherine, we can hear you.
Mhm.
Let's talk about something else that's going on. I think this is important as well, since I'm vamping here. But this is really something that's happening right now. This week, we're going to see, and this wasn't what Catherine and I agreed to talk about, but it's what I just got done writing on, so I'm going to talk about. This week, the January 6th commission is going to be ramping up activities. We're going to see Nancy Pelosi and others trying to reset the narrative, as they call it, on January 6th. And so we're going to see a lot of stuff about, invasion of the Capitol, insurrection, all that crap. And quite honestly, I'm sick of it. If Nancy Pelosi wanted to actually get to the truth, she would ask a couple of very simple questions. And I'll just give you one or two. But the first question she'd ask is, why did the Capitol Police lie about the death of Officer Brian Sicknick and claim that he was killed by somebody hitting him in the head with a fire extinguisher, when in fact he died of natural causes the next day? No wounds to his head, no wounds to his body. Reported to the Capitol Police after January 6th. Talked to his brother. There were no problems with him. And he died of a stroke. Unfortunately, he died of a stroke the next day. And yet, the people were told that he died because somebody hit him in the head with a fire extinguisher. The Capitol Police knew that wasn't true. And yet, they reported that anyway. Chances are Nancy Pelosi knew that wasn't true. And yet, she, pushed it as far and hard as she could, going as far as on February 2 of 2021, having him lie in honor in the Capitol. And I don't have any problem with honoring a Capitol officer who passed away, but let's just be honest. He wasn't lying in honor because he passed away from a stroke and natural causes, as the coroner found. He was lying in honor because he was a political prop for Nancy Pelosi. Somebody needs to get to the bottom of why the Capitol Police lied, and if they got paid off by having their budget dramatically expanded within the 3 months. That's just one question that they need to be asking, and that honest people want to find out what really happened need to be asking, because the fact is, a lot of what we've been told about January 6th just really isn't what happened.
All right, Rick, I'm back. I got my internet connected again. So I am actually working on that piece right now that you submitted. I'm just making a few edits, making sure, the typos and things. So we'll have that up tomorrow on Daily Torch. And I think that that's going to be an important piece. And that, I think, will be an important messaging and policy area for the GOP in this coming year, because a lot of Americans still want answers. I mean, we're not getting answers out of this phony Nancy Pelosi committee. Clearly, that's not a truth-seeking commission.
Well, and Catherine, we've got people still in jail who didn't actually, whose big crime was they stood around in the Capitol taking selfies for 30 minutes.
Right.
And we've got people sitting in jail, having their civil rights abused.
Yeah.
14 members of Congress sent a letter to DC mayor urging her to fire the jailer, because the jailer is engaged in such heinous conduct as to be almost unbelievable. And so we're looking at, and that people like Louis Gohmert, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Paul Gosar, and Andy Biggs, and a number of other members were on that. And the question I've got for Kevin McCarthy is, why isn't every single Republican in the House on that? How can the members of the House of Representatives, why isn't every member of the House, every single member should be able to agree that violating people's civil rights, abusing them in prison, is not acceptable. It's not acceptable if they were Antifa members. It's not acceptable if they're members of Proud Boys. I don't care. It's not acceptable. If we're going to live in a country that's one nation under God, indivisible, we have to treat everybody the same in those prison systems. And that means we have to treat people who have ideas that we like and people who have ideas we don't like the same. And yet, because of the narrative that was created a year ago about the Capitol, we now have those people who were literally doing nothing, still languishing in prison. And it is insane.
The other area that the GOP wants to look at in terms of making it a policy priority for the coming year is the security and border. And that has just been a disaster. There is no other way to say that. Even Hispanic Americans are moving away from the Democrat Party. And when the pollsters ask them what's going on, one of the biggest problems they have is how Biden has handled the border. Many Hispanic Americans are very upset to see the lawlessness going on at the border. Many of them came into this country legally, and they are very angry to see people just coming across, no testing, no requirements, and being let go into the interior, or as we've talked about, being flown sort of on these secret night missions and dropped into red states in many cases. So that's, I think, going to be a very big point for the GOP this year.
Yeah, it is. And that's a point that they can fight on in the budget, because the fact of the matter is they can force Joe Biden in the budget fight in February. There's two areas they can force Joe Biden to have to concede some stuff. One is force him. They can say, we're not funding all the stuff you want funded unless you build the wall. You could do that. You could force him to basically draw up the plans, take the Trump plans, and say, this is what you're going to do, and this is the timeline you need to do it in, and here's the money to do it, and force him to do that. And if he didn't do it, he'd be violating a congressional edict, and would be subject to the same set of laws that the Democrats tried to use to impeach Donald Trump over Ukraine. So but it requires some planning and some willingness to fight. And remember, the Democrats shut down the government in, I think, 2018 over not wanting to fund the wall. So they're willing to shut down the government over it. So our goal here is to jam it down their throat and force them to do it, because the reason they believe this helps them in the Hispanic vote, and as polls show it doesn't, they're not going to be nearly as vehement in terms of not building the wall, not creating border security, because they need to be seen as being pro-border security to have a chance of surviving in 2022.
And Rick, the last area that the Washington Times reporter identified as a policy area that the GOP wants to focus on for the midterms is something that you talk about all the time. It's China accountability. And we've actually seen some good things here in just the last week or so. Tell me what the GOP needs to be focused on there.
Yeah, one of the things that's happened is the Congress has been passing kind of meaningless legislation, or at least show votes. At least one side or the other would pass a show vote saying, we don't like slavery, blah, blah, blah. Well, somebody slipped up and got a vote that Congress passed and Biden signed, that basically says businesses can't import goods from places where they use slave labor without proving that slave labor wasn't used. Well, hallelujah. And I don't care that if Democrats and Republicans can both take credit, because they both can in this regard. Now, Walmart and some others are upset about it, because truth of the matter is that's where a lot of goods come from. It's one of the largest where the Uyghurs are, is one of the largest cotton producing areas in the world. I did think it's the fifth largest cotton producing area in the world, which means if you're using cotton to make a shirt and you're shipping the shirt, well, that shirt was created with slave labor because the cotton was picked by slaves. So Walmart, it creates a problem for some of the people who are importing goods from China. But you know what? This is a relatively simple situation. And for anybody from Walmart who's watching, I'm sure that you are. I talk to you guys all the time about stuff. Think about this. Think about the damage it does to have your products that you're selling be created by people who live in slavery, and recognize that those same products can be built, can be created just as inexpensively in Central America, in a lot of Asian countries, in a lot of African countries. So if you're dedicated to having it not made here, and that's a choice, then there's lots of other places you can make it. And if you sat there and you thought about it, and you made it in Honduras, let's just use Honduras as an example. You made it in Honduras, and you created 1,000 jobs in Honduras. And those 1,000 jobs created another 1,000 jobs, because there's always that kind of impact. And so you end up with, and you are become attractive because other people then are coming to Honduras and building right around the same area. You know what you're doing? You're building an economy in a Honduras, in a Guatemala. You're giving some base industry. You're allowing for people to have a choice to stay home and not be so desperate that they're going to come to America and try to be here to get the golden ticket, because they can stay home with their families. They can stay home and prosper there. President Guatemala said recently, when he was mentioning that Kamala Harris, the vice president, has not actually reached out to him and talked to him since she was down in Guatemala, even though she's supposed to be in charge of the border and trying to get to the root causes. And all he doesn't want handouts. He wants to be able to have investment in his country. He wants businesses to invest in Guatemala. We have the Central American Free Trade Agreement. It's in place. So Walmart, Apple, any of you guys out there who are importing from places where they use slave labor, how about moving it to Central America? Give jobs to people who want to work and want to have a job and they want to stay home. And let's build an economy in Central America. And that way, the people there are prospering and benefiting from capitalism while they're not tempted to come across the border illegally. And that's a win-win for everybody. It's a win-win for everybody. So it seems to make sense to me. So too bad for them if they don't like it. Change what you do.
Well, thank you everyone for watching us today and being a part of this conversation. We'll be back with another ALG live stream. Hopefully tomorrow we'll be back in our studios if we can get back into the office. And make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and share the video with your friends. And Rick, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, I really appreciate everybody. I hope you all had a great Christmas and a happy New Year. Come back rejuvenated and happy with a smile on your face. Lots of things that need to be done. We've got lots of challenges, but this year has to be about setting the agenda for 2023. So it's good news that Kevin McCarthy's thinking about it. It's up to us to make certain he's thinking about doing things that will make a structural difference, because we need to make the same kind of bold moves that the left has attempted to make. And we have to set the stage so those bold moves will be part of the priority for when a Republican president is in place in 2025, and we're able to get them done right away in 2025. And this next year, this is about setting that up and creating an environment where we can restore America. It's not just going back. This is setting a way of going forward.
Thanks, everyone, and have a great afternoon.